Okay, it is 2:30 in Illinois, so it's time to get started. Thank you so much for taking a bit of time out of your day to join me. I'm Valerie Heckman. I'm a senior product consultant with Intuit, and today we are going through a webinar called, in case you missed it, Recent Updates to QuickBooks Online Accountant and QuickBooks Online. So this webinar is intended for accountant users. We're going to spend a little bit of time in both the accountant part of our product and in a client's QuickBooks Online. For those who don't know me, and I'm seeing some familiar names from other webinars I've done, so welcome back and thank you for joining. I'm Valerie Heckman. I'm a senior product consultant with Intuit working in our accountant segment. I've been with the company 6 going on 7 years. I'm located in Naperville, Illinois, and my role is to really work alongside our other teams in educating bookkeeping, accounting, and tax firms as you move to the cloud and become what we call a firm of the future. And you can follow me on Twitter if you'd like. I am a certified pro advisor, but I am not an accountant. I'm not a practitioner. I just kind of take the form of one in some of these presentations, but I do like to say that up front. I'm just a gal that knows a whole lot about QuickBooks Online. And I'm very excited about this webinar. It is a newer format for me, and I have a couple of goals. I'm hoping that by the end of this, you're able to better discuss some of the recent updates to QuickBooks Online Accountant and QuickBooks Online here, QBOA and QBO, identify how these might impact you and your clients, and apply some new functionality to your work. We've had a lot going on in the last year especially, and I've sort of pulled from what I consider the most exciting or the most impactful, perhaps. That's just my opinion. So I'm not going to cover every single thing that's happened in 2018, but I've tried to pluck some of the best things for each area of the product out. And so here's sort of my list of topics today. Please make this interactive. Ask me questions. We've got that question box. I'd love to see what your thoughts are, your comments as we're going throughout. We'll start a little bit with team and client management in QuickBooks Online Accountant, the Work tab where you can manage projects and tasks for your firm and the work that you do. We'll talk a bit about Pro Advisor profiles and our new functionality around replying to reviews. And then we'll go into QuickBooks Online. We're going to sign in as an accountant user, although none of the stuff I'm covering in QBO is specific to accountant users. So these might be things that your clients end up utilizing and you can help them become aware of. We'll talk about some updates to the Manage Users page, to reports, some of the new reports that we've added lately. A couple of things in the bank feed. I know some of you were in my bank feed webinar yesterday, so this might be a little repetitive, but hopefully not too much. We'll talk about progress invoicing, undelivered invoices, and we'll close out with a couple of the inventory updates. So hopefully that sounds good. If there's something that's not on this list that you were hoping I'd talk about today, feel free to pop that in the question box, and I'll try and make some time for it as well. Okay, let's dive into this, and I'm going to jump back and forth between some slides and in-product stuff. So let's start off with QuickBooks Online Accountant. First thing here, little thing, but I think very impactful for some of you, the ability to search through your team list and hide and show inactive team users. Oh, we probably don't have to jump in for that. If you go into the team menu in QuickBooks Online Accountant, you'll see that find box up at the top, similar to the find throughout the rest of the product. And then under the gear, you've got the option to show or hide inactive team users. So a number of you may have a large team at your firm, or maybe just a medium team, and you want to be able to just quickly start typing part of someone's name or job title to pull up their profile and perhaps edit their access, right, their user permissions or their access to clients. Another thing, when you're going through the Add Client menu, you're setting up somebody new. You've got the option now to add a client that's not using QuickBooks Online yet. And I'm going to jump into the product so we can see that. Making sure we're still seeing my screen. We are. Okay. So I'm signed into QuickBooks Online Accountant. I'm Valerie. I have 68 clients that I have access to. So I'm actually the master admin of our firm's account. And I can set up my team users, of course, and now we can search through those. Anybody that has access to manage clients and subscriptions, and they've got this Add Client button, will see a new option here, and this has been around for a while, so you may have seen it already, but just in case. When we're setting up a new client, we've got the option after we enter in their basic info to choose their subscription level and how they're going to be billed. So we've had these options for wholesale and direct discount, whether the firm is billed or client is billed, for a long time. If I choose no subscription now, that all goes away. And really, I am just adding my client here to the list without any products added. So once I add that, the difference, these clients have QuickBooks Online, so they have their green QB, they've got all this information around what's going on in their books. Anybody that I've added that doesn't just shows up without anything here. And you might be wondering, well, why on earth would I ever want to do that? Well, when I click on their name, I can still go in and edit the client and add some contact information for them. I can still keep some notes, and I can still upload documents. If I want to store any documents related to this client here, I can upload them. If I go into bookkeeping, it's going to say, you don't have QuickBooks Online associated with this client, or QuickBooks Self-Employed, or our cloud-based tax product. You know, if you don't have any of those, you're not going to see anything here. But the notes and documents matter, and then it also impacts the ability to create projects in the Work tab for this client, and that's where we're going to go next, or almost next. One more quick thing. Okay, so we've got clients on this list that have QuickBooks Online. I've got a handful of ones that don't. I can sort the list down to see them, or of course search for a client on the list. Something that you may also come across that's an update is needing to delete clients permanently. So if you had a client that is no longer going to be working with your firm, in the past, they would have to uninvite you, remove you as an accountant user from their books, and then they would still perhaps show up on this list and you could mark them inactive. What we ran across and got a lot of feedback on is sometimes once that client's no longer working with your firm, it's really hard to get them to remove that access. And so now if I were to click into one of my clients and I go to edit them, there's a new option under the drop-down, in addition to making inactive, to delete them out permanently. Unlike making them inactive, this is actually permanent unless the client goes through the process of re-inviting the firm to their books. And so that would remove you from their accountant list. When they go into their managed users, you wouldn't show up there anymore, and then it would take your access to QuickBooks Online off, and they would show up the way that those clients without any product show up, and you can then mark them inactive. And so something to keep in mind with this, a client can't be on wholesale billing, so you'd have to remove them from wholesale billing first if that's something you're utilizing. And your firm cannot be the master admin of their QuickBooks Online. So if you're considered the master admin of their company file, it also won't let you delete this permanently. So you'd want to switch that to somebody else first. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Any questions so far? How are we doing? Haven't heard anything yet. Hopefully we're going at a good pace. All right, let's go into the Work tab and take a look at some of the updates there. First one here, actually let me start by just reminding everybody, or maybe introducing it if you haven't clicked into this work area before. This is our place in QuickBooks Online Accountant to really manage work that needs to be done in your practice, whether that's for you as a firm or for your clients, and assign these projects and tasks to different team users. You can also request documents from clients in this work area. And so this has been around for a while, but we have added a number of enhancements. So if you haven't looked at it in a while, hopefully this will be helpful. The first is when we originally launched this, it was really to manage the work that needs to be done for your clients. Now when you create a project, and I give my project a name, so maybe we're doing monthly bookkeeping as a project. Ooh. hard to type and talk. I can now assign whatever that project is to my firm in addition to my clients. And you'll notice that your clients that don't have QuickBooks Online yet are on this list, right? We created Joe's Coffee Shop earlier. I, of course, can give that a due date. I could set this to repeat every month and choose what day or a certain week or whatever. And then I would assign this to any team users that have access to this client. So in this case, I just set them up and I'm the only one that I gave access to initially. So the work would be for me. And then within a project, I can create tasks, right? So maybe I'd put every single step of my workflow for completing the monthly bookkeeping for this client. And I could assign that to different team users if I gave them permission for this particular client as well, and different due dates here. And then, of course, in addition to creating work for the clients and assigning it to team users, sure, we can say that, I can also create work that needs to be done for my firm itself, right? If you've got a project that's not specific to a client, we can set that up too, and you just assign it to my firm. The next piece here, and you probably saw it as I was doing this, is the option to create templates now in Work. We've got a bunch of quick start templates that are put together by QuickBooks to kind of give you an idea how the project templates may look. And then you can also set up your own custom templates. Or if you choose no template, you're just creating a one-off project or task. But if I have a template or I use one of these quick start templates for monthly bookkeeping, it fills in what this would look like, and I can go down the line and see all of the tasks already in place, and then it's just a matter of changing the due dates and assigning it to different people if I needed to. I can also even have the details of each of these tasks pre-filled as well when I'm setting up templates. So I access the templates from here. I manage them from this button in the upper right-hand corner. When I go into that menu, I can see the custom templates that I've created and when they were last used, and create projects right from the template, as well as these kind of quick start templates that are part of the product that are already put together. And something to know about the quick start templates is you can duplicate this and kind of create your own template based off of it. So maybe it just gives you some ideas on how to get started, and you can add your own steps and the specific things that need to be done in your firm. Or I could create one from scratch as well. And I didn't put this in as a polling question, but anybody using the Work tab in your practice today? I'm curious. Let me know in the question box if you are, or if you've thought about it even. Okay, two other quick things here in the Work tab is new options around notifications. So in the past, if somebody needed to see what work has been assigned or when somebody made a change, they really need to go into the Work tab and look at those things to see the changes. Now you can set up to have changes emailed. Something to keep in mind with this is it is on a user-by-user basis. So I am signed in as Valerie, so any settings that I change here only impact me. If Joe is another person at my firm, or Jim, or whatever, they would need to sign in and change their own settings. By default, new assignments and due dates are turned on, but I can easily click this pencil and decide which of these types of things I want to be emailed about. We also have a new integration with Slack in the Work tab. So if anybody is using Slack, it is a messaging tool that many firms seem to be embracing, a lot of businesses embracing to communicate internally, and it kind of in some ways replaces email because you're able to talk in different channels and individual conversations and group conversations. And so without getting into too much detail on this, there is the option to set up QuickBooks Online to work with Slack and make changes to the types of notifications that come up in there. And it would guide you through setting that all up and picking and choosing what that's going to look like. and you'd assign your users in your firm to their users in Slack, and then the channels that you utilize if you want different client notifications to go into different channels. That could be its own webinar, I'm sure, so I'm not going to talk about that too much, but keep that in mind, and I'm happy to send some information along on how that all works. You probably noticed when I made a change to one of my projects or added a new project, I had a little notification in the corner of my computer. That's because I have Slack turned on, and so that was a notification to me that I have a new project to do. So that's a little bit of how that would work if that was set up. Switching gears, because I could talk about work for a while if you let me. Let's talk about the Pro Advisor profile updates. So I saw that the majority of you on the call are certified in QuickBooks Online, which is awesome. If you're not already or you don't know what that is, it is our training and education program for accountants around QuickBooks Online, and we also have one for QuickBooks Desktop, and that is managed through this Pro Advisor tab. The QuickBooks Online training and certification is a totally free program. There's not a software purchase involved like there is with QuickBooks Desktop. When you come into this Pro Advisor tab, we show you the benefits of getting certified, and then there's a tab for the training. Not going to go into too much detail on this, but once you become certified, and there's the different modules and courses, it shows you your progress, and once you become certified, you can download your certificate and utilize that to market yourself as somebody who is certified in QuickBooks Online. But once you've gone through and done that, what it also does is unlock your ability to set up a Pro Advisor profile. And that is how we at Intuit connect up small businesses that are looking for help with the accounting professionals that can help them. And so the profile in here, we can get to it from the Benefits tab, or you can go to this little person icon in your upper right-hand corner. And this is where you would set up your profile, turn it on to be included in our search results in our Find a Pro Advisor directory that we kind of point small businesses to, and they're looking for help from a professional. And we also do some kind of matchmaking things in the product with them as well if they don't have an accounting firm tied to their company. So mine is turned off. You can keep your profile turned off if you want to. It's not required. If you're certified, not necessarily be listed in the directory. But I did want to point out a couple of new things here for those that already have profiles set up. There is now an option to indicate if you offer free consultations. So to click the pencil here, I can indicate if I offer that. We have also increased the service option. So if you haven't updated this in a while, check out all of the different types of services that you can indicate you provide to clients. Used to be a shorter list. In terms of credentials here, we've added a couple of options, and when you have things like enrolled agent and CPA turned on, it actually adds that title abbreviation to your name in your profile. Now, mine is turned off, but if I had it turned on, and maybe I'll do this just so you can see it. Oh, this is another kind of new thing. If you turn on your profile, it does guide you through doing a verification process so that we know you are not a scam robot or something on the internet trying to put a profile up. We want to make sure that it's a real person, and that's in the best interest of everyone. Okay, so I haven't gone through that, so I can't show this, and I don't want to be included in the search results because I'm not a real pro. Years ago, I turned it on once, and I got a lead within like an hour. Like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. But if you have it turned on, you get a URL that you could copy and send to your clients if you want them to review you, or send to somebody if you want them to look at your profile. Maybe you have a lead that you've gotten from elsewhere that you'd like to just, hey, this is who I am. There's now an option to edit that as well. So if you have a name change or you go by a nickname instead of your full name or something, you can edit that URL now as well. And then speaking of reviews, there's also the option now for you to reply to any reviews that you get. So here's a preview of what a public profile would look like. A lead would have the option to send a message, and then there's also the option to write a review. So if you get a review, there's now going to be a little link that shows up below that allows you to reply to it. So kind of keep that in mind here. I think that really helps, right? Give people some extra insight into why that person said what they said, or you can thank them, or whatever works. Oh, and I do have a quick little slide of what that looks like. Little button to reply to the review. All right, let's switch gears into QuickBooks Online updates, unless anybody has any questions for me. I think we're doing well so far. Very good. Okay, so with Manage Users, we've updated the look and feel. There's also now the option to set up time tracking only users in both Essentials and Plus. And we've added, for any of your clients that are subscribed to either QuickBooks Online Payroll or QuickBooks Full Service Payroll, the two payroll offerings inside of QuickBooks Online, there is now an option to indicate a no payroll access. So let's take a look at what that is like. First thing first, the look and feel. There's now, when we go into Manage Users, when I jump into one of my clients' books, there is a tab for their users and for accountants, and there's no more pop-ups when you add a new user. I know sometimes your clients would run into obstacles if they didn't know how to turn off their pop-up blocker. So we got rid of those. If your client does not have you invited onto their books yet, or maybe, you know, if we think about prospects, somebody's out there and they don't have an accountant yet, they will see a box to invite by email, or they can search that Pro Advisor directory. So that's one of the spots that we point people in that direction if they don't have an accountant yet. But good to know if you have a client that comes to you and they already have QuickBooks Online but need to invite your firm in. Something to keep in mind, though, is if they don't have QuickBooks Online already, it's super advantageous to add them through QuickBooks Online Accountant. And then if I am setting up a custom user on a client who has payroll turned on, there is now the option to indicate payroll access or uncheck the box if you do not want this individual to have payroll access. So if that box is unchecked, they cannot add, edit, delete employees, they can't add, edit, delete payroll transactions, and they won't be able to see any payroll reports when they're signed into QuickBooks Online. And this is a little screenshot of what it looks like if they try and go into an area related to payroll. Or sorry, you don't have access rights to this data. Now you might be wondering, you know, what does this look like if we're going into reports and trying to run reports that an employee's name would typically show up on? What we've done with that is change the name to just say payroll. So it would be harder to figure out who is who if we were drilling down into these types of details. So it adds a privacy layer there. But I think the big thing, of course, is that they wouldn't be able to go in and create any checks or view any tax payments or any of those things. All right, we're going to run some of these reports, but just to give you a list as a preview, we've updated the report center. There's now an option to mark reports as favorites. So we've made a couple changes to the interface. Trial balance and general ledger reports have been added to Simple Start. So that's our lowest tier of the QuickBooks Online subscriptions. Used to be that you'd have to be on Essentials or Plus to have Simple Start, or excuse me, to have these two reports, but we've added them to Simple Start. There's also a 1099 transaction detail report. We introduced that in January, but I know most of you were pretty tied up from January to April, so you might not have noticed that one there. And then more recently, we've added an invoice and received payments, bills and applied payments, and for clients that have the payroll subscription, a payroll summary by employee. So let's take a look at some of these reports. Okay, so I'm going to dive into one of my clients. And actually, well, yeah, we'll start with this one. We're going to have to switch to a different client when we get to the payroll report, but that's okay. All right, we are about halfway through, and I haven't seen any questions yet. So either that means we're at a good pace, or nothing's come up, or you guys can't hear me. So if you want to check in and let me know if I'm going too fast, too slow, or if you do have questions, I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so I'm going to go into our reports tab and look at this. All right, you guys are saying no questions. That's good. Hopefully this is useful so far then. All right, so our interface has changed. There's now a tab for standard reports, custom, and management. So we've divided those into 3 different sections. The standard reports have different kind of sub areas that you can collapse and expand to see the reports that are in here. Now, this is really geared towards your clients that are going into QuickBooks Online. We got a lot of feedback that it was hard to go through different menus to find what they were looking for, and a lot of folks who would say, hey, I wish QuickBooks Online had this report, and it turned out that it did, but they just didn't know where to find it. So we put everything on one page, made it a lot easier to search for a report. You can start typing any part of the name. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first word in the name, and see anything that sort of fits into that description. As a bit of a tip, if you're an accountant user, you can do the same thing in the search. So even if you just flipped into a client's books and all you want to do is run a quick report or two, you can always use your search to start typing the name of a report, and it'll do the same kind of thing, including any custom reports you saved, which is nice. And if you type an R and a colon, it pulls up the entire reports list, including your custom reports. So for that client. Quick little side tip here. Okay, but in terms of what's new, I can click on the stars to mark a report as a favorite, and it moves it into this favorite box. That is specific by user, so your clients can favorite their own groups, but maybe you give them a little nudge to favorite something like a business snapshot or what have you. Newer reports. I mentioned the bills and applied payments and invoices and received payments. I'm excited about these. This will show you the bill payment, whether it was a check or credit card, and what it was applied to, and those details. And of course, I can narrow this for different date ranges, go into customize if I wanted to, maybe change the columns, add something extra here if I wanted. And then save my customization if I want to put it on that list. The open invoices and payments, very similar, just the other side of things, right? Got it for AR and AP. And then I'm going to flip into another client to look at the payroll summary report, because this particular client does not have payroll turned on. And while I'm doing that, I've got a question here. Let's see. Oh, I've got a couple questions. Give me just a moment. I'm going to come back to the one on manage users towards the end, but somebody did ask about favoriting reports. So favoriting reports, that's this section up top, and you favorite those by putting a star next to them. Now, if you want to kind of favorite, if you will, or save a custom report, you would run and build out this list. You would run a report, configure it however you'd like. So, maybe I want to customize it and make my numbers negative or something like that, change the rows and columns, right? I can go through and do my whatever customizations I'd like. When I save that customization, I've got the option to add it to a group, decide who I'm going to share it with, and that builds out my custom reports list. So we would see anything that we saved in that area. But the favorites is just if you quickly, want to guide your client through checking off some of these so that they know what are the best things to run when I sign into their books. If you favorite stuff, it's only going to show up for you as a user. Okay, hopefully that's helpful. Now, payroll reports. Payroll subscription has to be turned on, and then it's all the way down at the bottom, but of course I could use the search for this as well. One of the big pieces of feedback that we've gotten over the years is that if a client was using QuickBooks Desktop for payroll, and you ran a payroll summary report, it looked like this, where you'd have a column for each employee and the whole breakdown and your totals. And it was hard to get similar formatting out of QuickBooks Online. And so we have added now the payroll summary by employee. And when I run that report, I will see the same kind of information, right? Each of the pay types, tax withholdings, deductions, their totals, and then each employee's column as well. And I can run this, of course, for different date ranges, different employees, display my columns either by employee or by pay period, and I can even add columns for their hour. Now, if you change anything here, you want to click Run Report, or their rate, or any combination thereof. So hopefully that is helpful. And of course, if I click on any of these blue, it'll drill me down into that area. And you wouldn't see this if you are a user that doesn't have access to payroll. But you're all in as accountant users, so this is a great place to see a comprehensive report of wages, deductions, tax info, totaled by the employee or by the pay period. Okay, I'm going to switch back into my other client here. And I will touch on managing users, because I did that with slides, but that's okay. Let's open it up and look at it. Okay, so that is under the gear. Whoops. Manage users. And these are the tabs I was talking about. There's the user tab and then accountant. So your client can invite up to 2 accounting firms to their books, and then of course within your firm you can set up your team users and indicate which clients they have access to. But if we're setting up users in QuickBooks Online Plus, when we go to add user, you'll see an option for custom, company admin, reports only, and time tracking only. Reports only is exclusive to QuickBooks Online Plus. Time tracking is in Essentials and Plus. Custom user is where you would find, if payroll's turned on, that little checkbox I showed. So this particular client doesn't have payroll turned on, but I can do limited access here. And this was the question, was if you can set up something where somebody is able to do just customers, I think. And so this is where you would see the breakdown of this is what the user can do and this is what they can't. And I'm thinking that you might be trying to get them a little bit more specific than what we have here. And so in that case, it might make sense instead to set them up or set up reports that only email to that user. That's one way I see that worked around if you're looking to really fine-tune and say, I only want somebody to be able to see this type of information. But if you're wanting them to write checks, yeah, they're going to have to be able to do some other things in order to do so. Great question. And if that's not helpful, I can always follow up. Any way to restrict, edit, delete? Yes, so I can edit an employee. Oh, you probably mean edit and delete transactions. I'm sorry. There's not something specific around that. So if they're able to access those types of transactions, they will be able to edit them. Sorry, I thought you meant edit or delete the user, which this is where you would do that. But keeping that in mind, you can always view the user activity from here or in the audit log and see what they've been up to. By default, the audit log shows this month, but if I cleared that filter, and maybe he hasn't really done anything in this book, but I could narrow down to different users. Let me just look at everybody and see who did what. I'm the one that's been interacting most in here, so we're seeing the things that I've been up to. But yeah, you can't turn off the audit log. And something to keep in mind with your clients is they will only see their users. Any actions that are performed by the firm's team users, it just shows the name of your firm here. They won't see that you've got 3 or 4 different people working in their books, if that applies to you. Oh, somebody asked, if you delete a user, do you lose their history? No, they become kind of inactive, similar to how if you inactivate like a customer or a vendor, you can still activate them later. So they become inactive and all of their history is still there. So if 3-4 years from now you have to figure out, okay, did that employee that we only had for a week did this? You'll be able to see it. Great question. All right, let's move into some of the bank feed improvements that we've made. I'm going to pull this up as a preview, and then we'll look at these. We have done a number of different things recently. We've added an option to turn on and off Remember Category, added some new options if you're splitting billable expenses, some extra functionality if you're resolving discrepancies when you're trying to match something that came through the bank feed against what was already in the books. My favorite here, I've got little stars around it, split payroll transactions now match. So that is specific, again, to if you've got clients that are using online payroll. But yes, we ran into things in the past where if you were splitting across two direct deposits, they didn't quite match. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we've been forming new connection types for major banks, and there's some new steps in place for getting certain types of banks connected. So let's look at all of these things here. The first being turning on and off Remembering Category. So as a bit of a refresher for those that are a bit newer to this, QuickBooks Online learns how transactions are categorized and makes a suggestion based on what's happened in the past. So if I told it that Starbucks was a travel meal, the next time a transaction comes through from Starbucks, it'll remember that you coded it or categorized that as a travel meal expense, right? And make that suggestion. But this is optional now. You can go under the small gear in the corner of the bank feed and turn off this option for remembering category selection. When that happens, it still might suggest that that might be a travel meal because we look at the vendor and say, well, chances are that's what it is in your chart of accounts. But if I change it, bring that going forward. And then if something came through as uncategorized, it's just going to continue to come through as uncategorized if that's turned off and you make the decision each time. So that might depend on your client's business type, whether that works for them. I was working with somebody recently that their client probably had like 50 things from Amazon every week. And of course, they aren't always office expenses. They fall all over the map. And so that was really helpful for them to turn off and then code those things each time. Or you can create a custom rule around it, of course, but we won't get into that now. If there is a transaction that you're adding straight from the bank feed, so we're not matching it against something that was already in the register, and we're adding it from the bank feed, and we'd like to split. In the past, we could split it across different categories. Now you can split it across different customers and mark individual splits billable. So we've just expanded upon the functionality for splitting transactions out. And then another update here, if we are matching or we have a transaction rather that we believe matches, but it's not pulling the match up in QBO, one of the most common reasons for that is because the dollar amounts don't quite match. We see $100 from the bank feed, but it was only $90 recorded in the register. In the past, we gave the option to resolve the difference, but we only had one transaction line to do so. Now you can add multiple transaction lines to resolve it. So if the reason that it was 100 in the bank feed and 90 in the register is because there was an $8 swipe fee and a $2 processing fee or whatever, we could actually give those things each their own line. So keep that in mind as you're going through and working in the bank feed. Maybe not super common, but when it comes up, it sure matters. And then the split payroll transactions. This is a little bit of a doozy to explain, so I apologize for the wordy slide, but hopefully this will help. In the past, if an employee was paid by direct deposit to two bank accounts using one of our QuickBooks online payroll products, the paycheck would just be a single entry in the register, but the bank feed would show two transactions, one for each of the employees' accounts. And so in the past, to kind of address this or go about it, you would exclude the bank feed transactions and just work off of what was in the register. But that became kind of a problem when you go to reconcile, right? Especially if you're hoping that everything in the bank feed is either matched or added from there. So now, split direct deposit transactions are split in the register and the bank feed so that they will match up. And this is what this would look like. Your employee paycheck, let's say it was $1,000, and the employee has requested $800 direct deposited to checking, $200 to savings. We can support that in online payroll, of course. And then when it is in the register, it's actually recorded that way instead of as one employee check. Now, if you're somebody who's like, I don't have anything to do with my client's payroll, they do that themselves, it's still good to know that now these are split in the register so that it doesn't look like they inadvertently paid the employee twice. Chances are if there's two paychecks for the same period, it could be that they were split to two different accounts for direct deposit. All right, very good. Checking in, very helpful. Yes, I'm really happy that we've made this easier to do and to handle without having to exclude anything out. In efforts to increase security and form stronger connections with major banks, and then eventually probably all of the different banks that connect with QuickBooks Online, there's a new connection type that we're utilizing. I'm not going to get into all the total background around it, but the important thing to know is that it's an open source authentication, which basically means that instead of having to constantly update bank user ID and password in QuickBooks Online anytime that changes at the bank's website, we are forming a connection with the bank where permission is given at the financial institution level for QuickBooks Online to access the account information and pull in the bank feed and account balances. So if this impacts one of your client's banks, there will be a prompt to update those connections. I'm going to put this link here in the chat if I can copy it. Oops, it's not letting me copy it there. Well, here, I'll open it and then I'll copy it. Let me put that in here if you've got questions around it. One moment here. Just so you have that later if you need it. Because this varies a little bit depending on the financial institution. And so when you click the update now, it'll guide through forming the new connection, or if you are connecting a client's bank account for the first time, so maybe you have a new client and you're setting up the bank feed, the steps might look a little bit different than they have in the past if you've done this before. So I'm using Chase as an example, but there's other banks that we've done this with, and there's probably more that we'll do this with in the future. So I click continue and I've got my bank. We typically have you validate that you are not a robot as part of the security here. Make sure you're human. And then it will pop open a new tab to have you sign into the financial institution's website. So in this case, Chase. Now, this is where I pause and say that in the past, a lot of the banks were much more okay with different types of users on an account connecting up with third parties, and in this case, Intuit being the third party, right? You've got the bank account holder, the bank itself, and then QuickBooks being the third party. So in the past, they would say, hey, if you've invited your accountant to this bank account, maybe view only, maybe to do certain things with online banking, whatever, they would allow that secondary user who doesn't own the account to set up connections with third parties. Not all of the financial institutions did that. Every bank has their own kind of idea around this, right? Their own thoughts on it. But a lot of them now want it to be the primary user that forms a connection with something like QuickBooks. So these steps might be something that your client needs to complete with their own user ID and password. So just giving you the heads up on that. Typically we'll prompt to send a code or a text. Again, every financial institution handles multi-factor authentication a little bit differently. And then if you're forming this connection initially, or if we're updating, we're verifying which accounts under that user ID and password we want to give QuickBooks the permission to pull in balance and transaction details around, right? So if your client's got personal and business cards under the same login, they would choose the ones that are going to be working with QuickBooks. And then we, of course, if you're sort of doing this initially, we guide you through the process of connecting up, and then the next steps would involve mapping it up to the appropriate place in the chart of accounts, which you're only going to see if you're doing this initial connection. If you're just updating an existing connection for this new method, you won't see all of those steps. Okay, looking to see if there's any questions on that. Somebody asked where you get to your Pro Advisor profile or Advanced Pro Advisor profile. Okay, well, let me go back to there. That's a good spot to ask it because I'm going to totally switch gears out of the bank feed unless there's any questions around the areas that we talked about. Hopefully we're doing well. All right, so I'm going back into QuickBooks Online Accountant. And I talked about the certification. In the training, we have your basic QuickBooks Online certification, and then there's also an advanced one that unlocks once you've gone through the kind of basic or introductory one. There's also an introduction to QuickBooks Online for accountants that you can do before the certification if you're really, really brand new and want to get some introduction to some more basic concepts. But the two certification courses are the QuickBooks Online certification and the QuickBooks Online Advanced. So once you've gotten certified, you can get started in this. Either one will be involved in the same profile. So you don't have a separate profile if you're advanced. We know if you're certified, if you go through and become advanced certified, that you have that credential, and we will add the badge on your behalf. So there's not like a spot that you turn that on. You'd have to go through and pass the cert to get it there. But the profile is managed under the little person icon, or we get to it in the Pro Advisor Benefits tab. So a couple different places you can get into manage your profile. This is your listing area. Okay, hope that helps. All right, we've got a couple of things left in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to go back into my clients' books here. And let's talk a bit about progress invoicing. So if you've been using QuickBooks Online for a while, you might be familiar. We had progress invoicing in beta, and then it rolled out earlier this year. And what progress invoicing is for, if your clients create estimates and need to invoice in increments, or they want to have a certain percentage of that estimate invoiced up front and then do different kind of amounts by line or by percentage later, they're able to do so now and track some progress towards completion. So typically we see this with project-based businesses, right? You've got like a residential contractor who's doing, and forgive me if I'm making a silly example, but maybe they're doing a kitchen remodel and they create their estimate for their customer, and then they're going to invoice for individual parts of that remodel as they go along. Instead of waiting to invoice for it all at the end and wait several months to get paid, right? Maybe at the end of each week they're doing some progress towards completion, or maybe it's certain pieces of it get done and they invoice for that. So if I am creating an estimate and I copy it to an invoice, I'll now see the options to do partial or custom invoicing kind of based on what aligns with how I want to be paid. So these settings are managed in Accountant Settings. And Sales. There's an option for progress invoicing, create multiple partial invoices from a single estimate, and that's just an on and off setting. And so if I create an estimate, and we'll just do something simple for the sake of example. Take that for Amy, and this is a photo studio. So we'll just put one line or maybe two so that we get an idea of this. Okay. So we have our estimate. I'm going to save, or I could save and send. Now, some time has gone by, and I either go to create the invoice, or maybe I go from the invoice area, right? I go to create an invoice, and I choose Amy, and she already has an estimate that's going to show up in the drawer for me. I guess I did create one before, but we'll do this one that we just created. When I go to copy that estimate to an invoice, it will pop open this box that asks me how I would want to do this invoice. Is it the total of the estimate, a percentage of each line, or a custom amount? So we'll do something like 30%. Why not? And then I copy that to the invoice. It's going to update the quantity to be partial. And then I would sort of save and send this, right? I'm just going to save it, but we would normally save and send. But I want you to see, so this estimate is now a linked transaction on the invoice. So when we go to look at that estimate, it's going to update and show us what's invoiced, what's remaining, our total, invoice subtotal, and our remaining. So then maybe I create another invoice off of this, right? I could do 30% more, or I could change it up this time. We'll just do the same thing for the sake of example. And we'll save that one. And now if I go back to that estimate, I will see that we have two linked invoices, right? Each for a third of our total amount. And it shows me kind of where we're at in the process. Now, if I had done this instead, like a custom amount per line, maybe this they paid for this whole thing up front, but we, only did part of this. As the lines close out, it'll check that off. Likewise, when we look at the invoice itself, we'll sort of see in the bottom corner the progress that we have so far. Hopefully that makes sense. And this is in Simple Start, Essentials, and Plus. So it'll be in those 3 tiers of QuickBooks Online. Switching gears again. Undelivered messages for invoices. So if your client emails invoices, if they actually save and send, email those out, and they bounce or they fail to send. Maybe they make a typo and they didn't put the email address in right and it doesn't send. Maybe that person doesn't have that email address anymore. You get a message, an email letting you know what happened, but sometimes those emails get lost in the shuffle. They don't get the attention that they need. And so now if that happens, we also will let them know in some other ways in the product. So if I were to go into sales, and I had some invoices that didn't send, they'll have this exclamation point. They'll also show up as undelivered. This one's orange because it's both undelivered and overdue. But I've got 2 here that the email didn't send, right? And when I hover over this, it shows me that. If I were to click into this invoice, in the upper corner, it shows me a delivery error and the last attempt that we made to send this out. And in addition to seeing this in the All Sales area, your clients would see this if they're looking at their invoice tracker. And in the invoice tracker, very similar, right? It's going to show me a bit more info than the sales page. And if I click to expand this, I've got this, hey, this is undelivered. We couldn't reach some of your customers. And when I click to review this, it actually tells me what's wrong, check out your email address, and maybe make a revision and send it again. Some more in helping your clients keep on track as they're invoicing their customers. And finally, a few things related to inventory. So inventory in QuickBooks Online is part of Plus. It is turned on, and we probably saw it here, in the Sales, Products, and Services setting Inventory is part of tracking quantity on hand, having that turned on. And a couple of these things apply to just products and services in general, but I sort of called this inventory all at once, but really products and services updates. So that is managed under the gear, the products and services menu. And 3 things that we've added recently are the option to assign a default class, a quantity on purchase order is visible, and then a preferred vendor. So I'm just going to edit an existing inventory item, but I would see these same things if I was setting something up new. So we sell photo frames here, and if I have a certain class set up that I want this item to be classified to, of course you have to be using class tracking for the class field to show up, so that can also be turned on in account settings under advanced if your client should be using class tracking. But this really helps if your client's adding stuff to invoices and sales receipts and such, and they're not remembering to fill in the class. This will pre-populate that. We have reorder points, and we now also see the quantity on PO. When we go to edit this item, an existing item, we'll see the quantity sitting on a purchase order. I'll also show you where you see some of this if we're going to add this item to a transaction. And then finally, down here under purchasing information, we'll see a preferred vendor field as well now for that item. And so that would pre-fill if we were reordering from the products and services list. It would fill in the preferred vendor on our order form, right? And then if I am creating a transaction, whether it is a purchase order, invoice, let's do a sales receipt. When I add a products and service, pick our frame here, and I hover over the quantity field, it shows not only the on hand and that this item is low stock, but also we'll see the quantity on purchase order here too, and our reorder point. I think reorder point and quantity on hand have been there for a while, but the quantity on purchase order is fairly new.